Most businesses only focus on growing and expanding, and they give little to no attention to their exit strategies until after exit is staring them in the face. Learn here at Boosting Business Value, brought to you by Blue Sky Business Resources. You'll discover how to shape a more durable and saleable business, and how to implement a powerful, well-planned, and rewarding exit. Join Dr. David Gruder and Jason Tuzinkewich as they deliver actionable tips for lower middle market company owners, executives, and their trusted advisors. Find out where your business currently stands, how you can meet your revenue objectives more reliably, and how to grow your venture to the next level, all with a smooth and fruitful exit in mind. Here are your hosts, Dr. David and Jason.
Welcome back. In this episode, we're going to begin a 4-part series on the 3 inflection points that all businesses must master to achieve durability and long-term growth. For those of you who are new to the Boosting Business Value podcast, my name is Jason Tuzinkewich. I'm the Chief Operations Officer for Blue Sky Business Resources. And with me, as always, is my lovely sidekick, my trusty companion, my foil in thought and theory, Dr. David Gruder. He is the business lifecycle, exit planning, and post-acquisition psychologist for Blue Sky Business Resources. Doctor, it's great to have you again.
It's great to be had, and it's great to be with you.
Fantastic. So tell us about this inflection point concept, Doctor.
I think I shall do exactly that. So, as we like to do in these episodes, when we introduce terms that might not be in common usage, or at least commonly used in the way we're using them in a particular episode, we're going to define what we mean by inflection points for the purpose of this 4-part series. So we view inflection points as major functional pivot points where strategy, organization, tactics, and leadership requirements must change. Not optional, absolutely mandatory.
Brilliant. And let's talk about what these inflection points are. And, one of the things that I think is going to come out as we talk about this over the next 4 episodes is that these are 3 phases that keep reoccurring. This is a cycle, not a linear progression. But, what you'll see is innovation. You think about a starting up business, you're innovating a product or a service and perfecting it before you can bring it to the market and share it with the world. Then there's the fruition stage where you've essentially perfected something or brought something to a point where you're ready to share it with the world, generate revenue, and you start to streamline. It's no longer about creation, it's about optimization. And then you go to the last stage of the cycle, which is bifurcation. And bifurcation is where you necessarily have to start innovating the next new thing, but you still want to maintain the focus on quality, on consistency, and on durability of the original product or service that is in the fruition stage. So you actually have to start splitting your resources, splitting your attention, and splitting your strategic mindset to be able to do both innovation and fruition. And this is where it gets really complicated, but it's also the beginning of the next cycle. And so, it's those 3 pieces on and on and on again throughout the life of your business. And so, as you can imagine, there are some pretty big challenges that you're going to face as you go from innovation to fruition, from bifurcation into, a new fruition stage, and continuing on. And what we're going to do in this episode, because these topics are pretty complex, is we're going to actually complement the big challenges with some roadmap and some guidance points for success. And we're going to kind of combine those 2 pieces of what we normally discuss in the Boosting Business Value podcast so that we can, build upon what we're talking about. And so the first thing that we recognize as a challenge is that everything that gets you to an inflection point will not get you through the inflection point. And what we mean by that is that when you get to the point, when you've innovated to the point that you're ready to launch a product and grow the business and scale the delivery of a product or service, that process, that mindset, that strategic planning, the capital and resource requirements, everything is different when you're optimizing and scaling than it was when you're innovating. And so being able to recognize when these inflection points show up and having the team and the organizational structure ready to actually hand off and say, okay, here's the baton. Now you run with it. You're in fruition now. That's a really big theme that we're going to talk about throughout this, because especially when you get to the third stage, you're bifurcating, right? You need people that are experts in the innovation piece, and you need an organizational structure that supports innovation while you're maintaining an organizational structure that requires consistency and kills change. And so that idea that what gets you to an inflection point will not get you through the inflection point is a really big deal. And the success roadmap for that is recognizing it, being proactive, having a plan, and being willing and capable to hand off to a structure and an organizational team that excels at whatever the new inflection point is.
Oh, well said. Absolutely crucial. Absolutely crucial. And so what we're going to do now in the big challenges section of this episode is we're going to talk about the challenges and navigation in each of these three inflection points, starting with the first inflection point, which is innovation. And what this inflection point is about, what innovation is about, is our capacity to creatively fail forward. It's the entrepreneurial mindset. It's the risk-taking mindset, not imprudent risk, but daring to be audacious, daring to step outside the box or obliterate the box entirely to bring something to the marketplace that hasn't been seen before, or hasn't been seen before in the form or with the features and benefits or at the price point that you're introducing this innovation. So I'm saying it that way because there are multiple varieties of innovation. And as we'll get into in future parts of this 4-part series, we'll talk about the strategy mindset and the tactical mindset and the operational mindset that's needed in each of these, navigating each of these inflection points. So with innovation, it's the capacity to creatively fail forward, the ability to maximize limited resources, because unless you have lucked into being amazingly well-funded, you're going to be on a very limited budget for doing the initial innovation, because innovation ordinarily occurs before profit. In fact, it always occurs before profit with whatever you're innovating, even if you've been profitable with other things before and you're diverting some of those profits into your next innovation process. Innovation is creating something new. It's not profitizing it yet. So there are limited resources. My analogy for that would be the scarcity, the rarity of not having limited resources would kind of like be similar to writing a book thinking it's going to be a bestseller. And yes, there are occasionally bestsellers out there, but the proportion of bestsellers compared to the number of books that actually come out onto the market, bestsellers are a tenth of a percentage, a tenth of 1% of all the books that come out. So if you're blessed with unlimited resources and innovation, good for you. If you're not, no harm, no shame, no fault, no blame. Welcome to the real world. So the other thing we're covering in these inflection points, capacity, ability, and focus. So Again, with innovation, it's the capacity to creatively fail forward, the ability to maximize limited resources, and focusing on extreme cross-functionality. That when you're on a limited budget, you've got ordinarily a small team with people who are wearing multiple hats, because that's simply what it's going to take to get things off the ground with the new innovation.
Yeah, absolutely. And well said, my friend. And even the astute businesses that are, flush with resources, keep the resource allocation to innovation streams marginalized. They keep them minimal because they need to force that point where a decision has to be made. If you have endless resources and you believe passionately in your product, you can just continue to spend those resources and not ever have to take the stern, focused look at, is this viable? Are we creating something that can find the fruition inflection point, right? And so I think about Elon Musk with SpaceX. He had all the money from PayPal. He had all the money from Tesla. But when you talk to the engineers that were at the beginning of SpaceX, it was still on a shoestring budget, and it was still on very, very strict deadlines, because that's how you force the focus and the capacity to creatively fail forward. You have to accept failure in order to innovate. Well, and so I think that's great, and I really appreciate you bringing that up. And that brings us to fruition. And the analogy that I like to point out here is, fruition is when a business goes from being led by an entrepreneur to being led by a CPA. This is when the business gets very conservative about change, very focused on the minutia and the details, and focused on quality and scalability. And both of those things, both achieving maximum quality and achieving maximum scalability, require that things no longer change, requires consistency. And so when you're moving from innovation to fruition, you are putting the brakes on change. There may be some incremental improvements that come along, but essentially you're saying this design is the design and we're running with it, right? And so fruition is all about the capacity to replace change with stability and consistency, the ability to emphasize resilience over creativity. Even though, you'll make some of those incremental improvements, you'll notice some things that can be fixed on the fly. You're not going to go back to the design board. You're just going to improve. And then a focus on minimizing failure rates and maximizing uniformity. When you want to reach scale with any product or service, the guarantee that you have to be able to uphold is that every client of yours, every person that purchases your product or service, will get a predictable experience. That is how scale is achieved. So that fruition point is a massive change from the innovation point. You start getting a lot more resources because you're generating revenue, right? You have the ability to buy equipment and increase your manpower and scale grandly. But you kind of change, you forego the ability to make major changes and disruptions in your own product or service line. And that kind of framework around the fruition stage of a business cycle is where you'll eventually hit the wall and have to go to the next inflection point. So doctor, bring us home.
Right. Beautifully said and set up, because the third inflection point in the inflection point cycle is what we call bifurcation. And what bifurcation is the capacity to harmoniously facilitate the next innovation without sacrificing current fruition. And so this is basically the essence of what I and my co-author of the books, The Nimble C-Suite and The Nimble Company, call nimbility, which is the integration, the intersection of resilience and innovation. not one over the other, both equally important and each needing to be emphasized more and less in different inflection points. So in the innovation inflection points, inflection point, that's what you're doing. You're emphasizing more the innovation part of nimbility and the resilience part less. I mean, obviously you have to build in resilience, but you're not focused yet on resilience, because that's what the fruition phase an inflection point is about, is installing resilience with what's been innovated. And this is just to tie this in with some other things we've said in the past. There are two counterbalancing, among others, two counterbalancing energies that every business has to deal with. There's the energy of transformation and the energy of stability. So the transformation domain is the magician, the wizard, and the stability domain is the steward. Stability, predictability, organization, and standards. In a company that doesn't have deep regard for the value of both innovation and stability, the company will not be durable. If there are power struggles between the innovators and the durability maintainers, the stability maintainers, you have a dysfunctional company. When there is deep regard for the gifts and the superpowers of both of those perspectives, and collaboration in order to maximize the benefits and minimize the blind spots in both of those perspectives, that's when you get a durable company. And that's basically what bifurcation as an inflection point is about, because it's the capacity to harmoniously facilitate the next innovation, which is the creativity side, the magician side, without sacrificing current fruition, which is the stability, stewarding side of the business. So that's the essence of nimbility. And bifurcation in this inflection point, it's all about the ability to separate into what I was just saying, stewards and innovators, not for them to be at war against each other, but for the business to understand that in the bifurcation inflection point, you basically have two teams that are to an extent siloed, but not cut off from each other. They're siloed only to the extent that their focus is necessarily different from the other group's focus. You've got the ones in bifurcation, you've got the ones that are doing the next innovation, while the ones who are maintaining stability and profitability with fruition of what you've already innovated are continuing to excel at that. So it's that ability to separate into basically two teams that are certainly talking to each other and collaborating, but their function and their focus is necessarily different. And so as you master bifurcation as an inflection point, you're focusing on synergy between both tracks. You don't want these two different tracks in opposition to each other or competition against each other or undermining each other. You want them both to be contributing to the higher good and durability and sustainability of the business. And, bifurcation can take a number of different forms. You can get bifurcation where a business stays focused on the general area that their previous innovation focuses on, or it can be a new focus area, or it can be a new market segment. It can involve keeping the company together as one company, or it can involve spin-offs where a new innovation is so different from the fruition in the company that you spin off a new division, or you sell it off to another buyer. So there are a lot of ways to navigate bifurcation, and I think you should talk a little bit about the Fuji and Kodak example in that, Jason.
Yeah, I think that most of our listeners are going to be familiar with the Kodak story, right? The Kodak R&D department developed the capacity for digital cameras, and the Kodak executives decided that that was not something they were interested in pursuing because it made their core business, film, obsolete, and they ruled the film world, and they didn't see film going away. Well, we know how that happened. But at the same time, their number one competitor was Fujifilm, right? And they were faced with the exact same conundrum, only they didn't have an R&D department that had developed the technology that was going to make them obsolete. They just knew that film was going to become obsolete because they saw digital cameras and understood what it could do. Rather than saying, we're great at film, we are Fujifilm, they said, okay, we've been great at film. What does that expertise translate into? And so while they maintained their Fujifilm arm, they bifurcated. They got this team of innovators to look at, okay, what does our expertise allow us to do? And they realized, hey, you know what? Our expertise in chemical substrates, our expertise in film coatings and development, and our expertise in these different chemical compositions allows us a lot of mobility. And they started pursuing a bunch of tracks, and some of the tracks that they ended up successfully pivoting into are they are now in cosmetics. They are producing substrates and components for a lot of cosmetic companies, and they're developing a lot of film coatings. They do coatings and protectants for automobiles, for shipping vessels, and for myriad other things. And so Fujifilm is still a very strong, very robust, very durable company because they were able to bifurcate. They were able to allow people to innovate within their organization and nurture that innovation without squashing it out. Whereas Kodak, the anti-Fuji, they were stuck in their inertia. They were afraid to throw resources to innovating. And while Kodak is still in existence, it's a mere shadow of what it was. And I love the description that you gave. This characterization of bifurcation is so important because this is truly where successful industries and successful businesses fail.
Exactly.
And so this is the part that you don't hear about enough in business conversations and in dialogue, but this is where great businesses go to die. And so, I heard recently this horrible statistic that with the rate of innovation and change in our modern world, the average life expectancy of a business today is less than 40 years. I mean, that's younger than me. That's younger than you. I know it's shocking for our listeners, but this is younger than both of us. And so, if I were a business, I'd be dead by now based on modern statistics. And it's because of this lack of understanding of these three inflection points and the lack of capacity to manage it. So I'm so excited that we're going to do this series, and I'm really looking forward to the next 3 episodes where, now that we've laid the groundwork for what we're talking about, we're going to talk about how strategies and strategic mindsets are different in these phases and how to work through that, how management expectations and requirements are different, and how the organization itself has to be fundamentally different in these phases, and work through, now that we know what these three,
and how leadership needs to be different in each of these phases too.
Yes, absolutely. And so now that we've laid the groundwork for what are the inflection points, what the heck are we talking about? Now we can really talk about, as a business owner, as an advisor to business owners, as part of the operational team, how do we ensure durability and growth because we understand these inflection points? And so, hopefully you'll stick around with us. We look forward to hearing your comments and feedback as we go on this journey together. But Doctor, before we sign off, What are your takeaways from this conversation so far?
Oh, well, it's been really juicy. And I think the first takeaway that I've got is that there is no getting around these inflection points. Ignore them at your own peril. Ignore them at the peril of your company's continued existence, profitability, and value. This is not optional. Inflection point mastery is mandatory for business durability, value, and saleability.
I love that. That's a great takeaway. And that kind of brings up in my mind the fact that you use this term mastery. And I think that I think about this is organizational mastery. It is a very rare human being who can master the needs, the paradigms, and the ability to facilitate success in these three different inflection points. But understanding that organizational mastery is requisite brings about a new imperative, a new sense of urgency to build a team that holistically can master these inflection points, and the ability to make handoffs organizationally, and understand that not only are you handing off a product and a service into a new inflection point, but you're handing off an entire organizational expectation, an entire new set of KPIs, an entire new set of metrics. Everything changes as you move through these inflection points, and building a team that can master this is crucial.
Absolutely. And that is directly connected to my other takeaway, which is that handoffs are mandatory. They're not optional. Leaders and teams who excel at innovation and creativity aren't the leaders and teams who excel at fruition, at stability, predictability, organization, and standards. Like I said earlier, they're both absolutely crucial. The magicians, the innovators, the creatives are just as, but not more important than the stability stewards. And so handoffs are mandatory. The people who are responsible for getting the show on the road in the first inflection point, the innovation inflection point, they need to be prepared to hand off the guidance of the ship, the business, to the fruition masters when innovation has birthed the thing that's being sold, right? So, and this is huge. This is a huge takeaway, because what Jason and I have seen over and over again is people who founders of businesses who are brilliant at creativity and innovation and development and startup and all of that entrepreneurial mindset, refusing to turn over the day-to-day functioning, the day-to-day leadership of the organization to the stewards, to the people who are really masterful at stability, predictability, organization, and standards during the fruition phase. So handoffs are mandatory. They're not optional.
Absolutely. I love that. And I hope I didn't steal your thunder there, Doctor.
Not at all.
But and the last thing, kind of to bring this home to the relevancy of why you and I felt like it was so important to talk about this, is that inflection point mastery is a prerequisite for boosting your own business value. And, as we've talked about many times, every single owner will exit one way or another. They will leave their business. Maximizing value. We talked about how successful businesses go to bifurcation to die. They either bifurcate or perish. And so being able to master all three of these inflection points so that you're always refreshing, you're always starting anew, that you're always innovating and becoming a new company every few years, this is critical to boosting your own business value as well as to achieving a successful exit. This is what buyers, whether they're strategics or whether they're private equity firms, are going to look towards when they're deciding if it's a discount or a premium on value. It's going to be, have they bifurcated? Have they gone through these inflection points? And how did the company survive and thrive through them?
Well said. So, ready for me to take us on home?
Take it home, Doctor.
All right. Well, on behalf of the always illustrious and articulate Jason Tuzinkewich and myself, we both thank you from the bottom of our hearts and the top of our heads for listening to this episode. We want to again invite you to click on the subscribe button so you can be notified immediately when we release future episodes, especially since this is part one of a 4-part series. And we also look forward to reading your thoughts, questions, topic suggestions, and other requests in the comments section at the bottom of each episode's page. And you can find all of our episode pages through blueskyadvisors.net/podcast. So lastly, we want to invite you to take advantage of a free resource that Blue Sky Business Resources provides, which is free surveys that you can complete that will help you get a far clearer sense of how to gauge your business's health in a much more accurate way. And each of these surveys includes real-time feedback and recommendations. So don't be fooled by free, because the value of these surveys is massive. And there are others who charge for their version of this, but Blue Sky, you can get into optimizing your business starting free with great feedback. So visit blueskyadvisors.net today to get started.
That's all for this episode of Boosting Business Value. May your new learning result in the smoothest and most profitable exit strategy for your business. With the right knowledge and guidance, the sky's the limit to what you can do. Do not miss an episode by subscribing to the show. And if you want to learn where your business currently stands, we also have free key opportunity assessments. Find all of them at blueskyadvisors.net/podcast. Thank you for joining us. See you on the next one.